Hello students and viewers, welcome back again to Science Capsule, a perfect self-learning tool for school children. I hope this channel is providing various videos related to education. So I believe you are understanding the concepts. So in today's video we are going to start a new chapter of your class 10th science, that is metals and non-metals. Basically this chapter is a lengthier chapter and one of the most important chapter as far as class 10th is concerned. So what I am going to do is this chapter will be divided into 4 episodes, and in each episode a separate content discussion will be there. In the first episode we will be looking into the basic things needed for learning this chapter, metals and non-metals, and physical properties, exceptional characteristics of metals and non-metals. So this is our first episode. In the second episode we will be seeing the chemical properties of metals and non-metals, because chemical property is very important, so it needs a lot more explanation. So we will cover in another episode where entire chemical properties of metals and non-metals will be covered. In the third episode we will be looking into how metals and non-metals react together. So as far as the reactivity between the metals and non-metals is concerned, it's very important. So a separate episode will be made available to you so that you will understand that in a detailed manner. And finally in the fourth episode we are going to looking into the extraction of metals from various methods. So what are the various ways by which the metals can be extracted? So altogether this chapter will contain 4 episodes, and I'll provide all these episodes together in a playlist, metals and non-metals. You can watch individual videos. So in today's video we are going to looking into the first episode, that is the basic about the metals and non-metals. So dear students, this video is going to give you the basic idea required to understand the chapter metals and non-metals. And if you have not subscribed this channel, subscribe this channel right now by pressing on the subscribe button which you see below the screen, and press bell icon so that you won't miss any of my future uploads. So let us start today's episode. Dear students, when we learn the chapter metals and non-metals, the first thing that comes to our mind is what is a metal, what is a non-metal? A basic question, but in order to seek answer for these questions, we should go to the earlier class, that is class 9th, where we have learned about matter. So in class 9th we have learned that matter is anything which occupies a space and have some mass. This is what we have learned. And on classification of this matter, it is broadly classified into 2 categories. One is called pure substance and another one is mixture. On further classification of pure substance gives you element and compound. Here element is the substance which is made up of only one type of particle. Iron is an example, aluminum, copper, carbon, oxygen, all these are the examples of elements. And these elements are further classified into 3 categories based on the properties. They are metals, non-metals and metalloids. So the metals, non-metals and metalloids are the classification of elements, as you can see on the screen. So here metal is a pure substance, non-metal is also a pure substance, metalloid is also a pure substance. So all these are the classification of elements, which is a pure substance, and element is classified under the pure substance. So whether it is metal, non-metal or metalloid, all are the classification of pure substance. So in our day-to-day life we use number of materials which are made up of metals, non-metals and metalloids. So here the question is, how can we identify a metal or a non-metal? Dear students, there are various properties. On the basis of those properties we can easily identify. On the basis of physical properties also, to maximum extent we can easily identify for a metal and a non-metal. So let us understand what are those physical properties which will help us to identify a metal and a non-metal, or differentiate a metal from a non-metal. So let us see all those things in detail. When we talk about physical state, metals are solid in state and they are a bit hard. Iron, copper, aluminum, all these are the examples of metals. If you see, all these metals exist in solid and somewhat hardness. So we can say that all the metals are solid in nature and they are hard, whereas comparatively if you see non-metals are soft in nature and they exist either in solid state or in gaseous state. Carbon is an example which exists in solid state. Oxygen is there which exists in gaseous state. So all the non-metals exist either in solid state or gaseous state, not in liquid state. Whereas in case of metals, if you see, all the metals exist in solid state, not in gaseous state. Some of the exceptions are there which we will see in the next section. So basically when we talk about the state, metals exist in solid state and they are hard, whereas non-metals exist in solid or in gaseous state, they are soft in nature. Dear students, malleability is a property of metals, which means changing into sheets. When a metal is beaten, then it can change into sheets. On the basis of malleability property, we make various materials of daily use. As you can see on the screen, plate, blade and various other materials. In each of the material you can see the malleability property, that is changing into sheets. Dear students, these are some of the examples of the use of metals on the basis of malleability. Can you give one more example of use of metal on the basis of malleability? You can mention it in the comment section. The property of metals which can be turned into fine wires is what we call ductility. All the metals possess the property of ductility. Now, because of this property, the wires which we use in our home is fine wires. It is made up of metals. So metals have the property of ductility. That is why it can be turned into fine wires. So likewise, various other metals have the property of ductility. On the basis of ductility, we can make various materials. Some of the materials based on the property of ductility is shown on the screen, which you can see. Sonorous means when the metals are collided or struck with each other, they produce a ringing sound. The property of producing ringing sound is what we call sonorous. No non-metals produce such type of ringing sound. Based on this property, one of the familiar use of this metal is in our school, the school bell is made of metals, because when the school bell is struck, then it produces a ringing sound. So on the basis of sonorous property only, the school bells are made of metals. You are very much familiar with the fact that when the utensils in your kitchen, when falls down, then it produces a type of sound. So such type of sound is produced only by the metals, not by the non-metals. So this is what we call it as sonorous. Lustrous means a shiny appearance. When the metals are exposed to light, it tends to shine. So this kind of shiny appearance is used for making ornaments. As you are very much familiar that the ornaments, as you can see on the screen, these are made only because of the property of shiny appearance. They tend to shine, that is why the ornaments are made of metals. And here non-metals don't show the property of shiny appearance. And because of this shiny appearance, you see number of materials are made of metals. So the property of metals which tend to shine is what we call lustrous property. The next important physical property of metals is they are good conductors of heat and electricity. Because of this property, the electrical wires which we use are made of metals. They are made up of aluminum, they are made up of copper, right? So all these are metals. Why metals are used for the electrical wires, electrical conductivity? Because they are good conductors of electricity. And the cooking utensils, you see, you are very much familiar. All the cooking utensils are made of metals, because metals are good conductors of heat. And at the bottom you see some of the utensils will have, you can see on the screen, copper bottom is there. Why? Some of the utensils have silver bottom or some other metals, and some other utensils will have copper bottom. Why? the bottom is made of copper, then it can conduct heat much faster than other metals. Mostly all the cooking utensils are made of metals because the metals are good conductors of heat and electricity. So this is one of the important property of metals. So far we have discussed about the properties of metals, and all those properties what we have discussed will be opposite in case of non-metals. That means non-metals are soft in nature, metals are malleable in nature. Opposite to the malleability is brittle, that is when the non-metal is beaten it won't change into thin sheets, rather it breaks into powder, we call it as brittle. So one of the familiar example to understand the brittleness is when you hit the glass breaks and spreads into tiny particles, right? So this we call it as brittle. And when the metals are drawn, then it can be changed into fine wires, whereas this property won't be possessed by the non-metals. And metals are shiny appearance, metals are lustrous in nature, whereas non-metals are non-lustrous, and metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, whereas non-metals are poor conductor of heat and electricity. So contrary to the property of metals, we can understand the property of non-metals. Whatever the properties we see in the non-metals, that will not be there in the metals. So likewise we can understand the physical properties of metals. So to the maximum extent we can easily identify a metal or a non-metal on the basis of physical properties. So far we have seen various physical properties. With the help of those physical properties we can easily identify a metal or a non-metal, but there are certain exceptions that needs to be understood. We should know the exceptions of metals and non-metals. Let us understand the exceptions of metals and non-metals. In the beginning we have seen that metals exist solid in nature, but not all the metals exist in nature except one metal. Can you name? Yes, mercury is the metal which exists in a liquid state at a room temperature, whereas all other metals are solid in room temperature except mercury, which exists in liquid state at a room temperature. This is the exception. And in case of non-metal, we have seen that all the non-metals exist either in solid state or in gaseous state. We have not seen any non-metal which exists in liquid state. And you should know that bromine is a non-metal which exists in liquid state at a room temperature. So these are the two exceptions on the basis of state in case of metals and non-metals. Bromine is a non-metal which exists in liquid state. Mercury is a metal which exists in liquid state. Got it? We have seen that all the metals are hard in nature, but it is not true for all the metals. There are metals which are very soft in nature. Sodium and potassium are the metals which can be cut even with a knife. Such a soft metals are sodium and potassium. So this is exception here. We have seen before that all the metals have high melting and boiling point. There are some exceptions over here. Cesium and gallium are the metals which have very low melting point. If we keep cesium and gallium metal on our palm, it takes the heat of our body and it starts melting. So we can imagine that how low melting point these metals have. So this is exception here. Metals are lustrous, that is they show the property of a shiny appearance, whereas non-metals do not show this property. Here the exception is that iodine, which is a non-metal, and show the property of lustrous. So this is an exception. Here one of the most important exception of non-metal is that we have seen non-metals are soft in nature and brittle, that is when it is beaten it changes into small pieces, right? Whereas an allotrope of carbon called a diamond, which is the only naturally occurring hardest non-metal in the universe. So can you imagine, we have been discussing about the fact that all the non-metals are soft in nature, but an allotrope of carbon, that is diamond, which is a non-metal and very hard in nature, which exists in the universe. So this is one of the major exception of non-metal. In our discussion, we have seen that non-metals are a poor conductor of heat and electricity, whereas one of the exception of this non-metal is graphite, an allotrope of carbon, which is a good conductor of heat and electricity. So here it is an exception. Here the allotropes of carbon, that is graphite and diamond, shows some of the exceptional characteristics in case of non-metals. You should know what is an allotrope basically. Allotropes are the substances which have same chemical properties but have different physical properties. So about the allotropes we will see in another chapter, that is carbon and its compounds. For now you just understand that diamond and graphite are different forms of carbon. Dear students, I believe you found this video useful. If so, hit the like button and share as much as possible to your friends. And if not subscribe this channel and press bell icon so that you won't miss any of my future uploads. So that's all we have in today's episode. See you all on second episode where we will be learning about chemical properties of metals and non-metals. Till then, take good care of yourself. Bye.